Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining our webinar today with Dr. Massimo Mangialavori. So I'm delighted to have the honor of introducing Dr. Massimo Mangialavori today, who's here to present his latest in a very long line of achievements, the Suggesta repertory. We all know Massimo so well from all the many books he has published and all the lectures and teaching. But as I was looking at his bio on his website, I realized there were so many things I didn't know that he had done. In fact, after graduating from medical school, he worked in food science, and a lot of his early experiments were related to the effects of fasting. And he was always interested in medical anthropology, and this led to an interest in natural medicines. And I guess from there, it was a very short step over to homeopathy. And since being introduced to homeopathy more than 35 years ago, Massimo has produced an incredible amount of work. It would be impossible to cover everything, but what he's most well known for is, I think, the method of complexity, which describes remedies and patients in terms of themes that are mental, emotional, and physical. And the work really shows that different members within a taxonomic group may not be related homeopathically, while remedies from many different parts of our natural world can have similarities and can coexist in the same homeopathic family. And in fact, I remember from back in school, the first homeopathic family that I learned about was Massimo's C groupings and C remedies. And in addition to coming up with this method of complexity, as I said, he's published an enormous number of books. He's taught extensively around the world, and many of those talks and lectures, in fact, have been published as well. He's been part of several initiatives to help the study and practice of homeopathy within the homeopathic community, such as the Delphi Project to help collect and share cured cases, directing a clinic supervision group at the Homeopathic Hospital in Glasgow, designing a new website called HomeoVision for homeopaths, homeopathic pharmacists, and patients. And I believe it's a source of a huge amount of scientific information within homeopathy. And I cannot not mention his work with David Workenton, which led to the development of McRepertory and reference works, and his extensive collaboration also with Synergy Homeopathic Software. In fact, aside from these, he's also developed two other software programs, Consulta, which is a huge medical record database with access to cured cases, and Tezi, which is another database designed to store information about remedies. And all of this knowledge and his extensive clinical experience, his collection of verified symptoms in cured cases, all of this has gone into this repertory that he's presenting today. In fact, I wonder how he finds time to do all of this and have a personal life and be at his farm in Tuscany. It's just incredible. So I'm so honored to present Massimo today, and I give you the platform, Massimo. Thank you.
Grazie, Rupali. You're so kind, and you make me flush, really blushing. And I'm a shy person, you know. That's an issue. Okay, okay. Let me breathe. Good. I think I should share my screen, don't I? Otherwise, you cannot see my presentation. So I hope that you can see it. So we had the occasion in Italy to present this work that we did with my friends. And I would like to underline, first of all, that I did not this huge amount of work on my own. I did it with three colleagues of mine, which are these guys. One is Fiorella Cerami, who's here. The other one is Federico Del Conte, who is also attending this webinar with us. And the other one is Riccardo Tomassini, another beautiful colleague from Italy. We're friends, very good friends since many years ago, working together, studying together. And I must tell you that without the great, great, beautiful support and help of these colleagues of mine, this project, this idea, which I had in my mind since a long time ago, would never be possible. So without them, Suggesta would never exist. Okay. So, and I would like also, before we start, to thank SHS. I'm not mentioning each one of them in person. Now, I know that there is Rupali with us, there is Lucy, there is Paresh. I must tell you that I find out with Rajan and a lot with Paresh, not only a great help, a great support, but a great hug to start working together, even developing something more, and let me say even better than what I started so many, many years ago with David. So let me introduce you something, because first of all, I think it's important for me, I would say for us, to explain you why we decided to create a new repertory and why this repertory, we don't like to call it repertory, but something else. Okay, let me explain you why. So the project started more or less 13 years ago, because in that moment, it was a difficult moment of my life, even as an homeopath. And David was still alive. We had a long, long talking about this idea. And at that time, my editions, which I started to do more than 35 years ago, were more than 20,000. And David told me, Massimo, I think that you should do something in this direction. Please help me, because I need you to create a repertory for us, for KHA. I was very reluctant because, you know, as you can see in our literature, there are so many books of Materia Medica, so many books of whatever, but despite this, the repertories are not that many. They're not so few, but not that many in comparison to other pieces of our literature. And this is because, believe me, to work on a repertory, to make it well done, and mostly to try to make it something new, which, according at least to your delusion, should be better than the other, it's a huge, 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 and very annoying work. But I think at the end it is also extremely interesting. So I started, as the most of you, I'm not, I'm a different young person, let me say like this. Okay, I'm more than 62 now. And I started, as many of you probably, with the basic Kant when I was a student. Slowly I moved to use Kunstli, then Bartel, then synthesis, and then the other beautiful repertories that we have in our literature. But you know, I think that it's important for us to just stop a minute and to think about what we did. Because at the time of Kant, the problem was like at the beginning of the Materia Medica from Hahnemann. We needed to improve it, to make it larger, to make it better, because it was a small book. But since that time on, nowadays, I think after more than 35 years, I think that we have to face a very, very different problem. Now, let's talk about the repertory and not anything else. But I think that even in homeopathy, like in many other fields of science, the problem of facing a big data is extremely important, which does not mean that we don't have to keep writing, keep adding a good material to our literature. The problem now is that this material is too much, is not necessarily improving in terms of quality as it is improving in terms of quantity. So this plethora of data, let me say, I would like to use this word, it's a huge amount of data, not necessarily a good amount of information. Again, from the time of the Kant up to now, if you could see the book of repertory, it's even heavy to carry in your bag. It can be used so well now because we have those wonderful programs. But still, which kind of information are we seeking in the repertory? I think that repertory should give us essential, few ones and very clear, clinically confirmed. I learned yesterday, I'm sorry to say this, that when I wrote Diriment, my good American friend told me, Massimo, nobody knows the word diriment in English. Diriment does exist as a word. It's a Latin word. What does it mean, diriment? Let me say, because this concept, it's something I will use later on during this lecture. Diriment is a concept which is allowing you to make a clear differential diagnosis. For example, how often it could happen to you that you prescribe to a patient a certain remedy and you would like to understand, to feel, to try to grasp if this symptomatology can be calcarea carbonica or calcarea bromata or calcarea iodata. And so you're seeking for symptoms, but the ones that you can get in our books are not giving you any precise help. A diriment symptom, a diriment theme, a diriment concept is something not only in science, which is telling you go right instead of left. It's an infection, okay, it's a virus, it's not fungus, it's not bacteria. It's an eruption, it's a psoriasis, it's not an eczema. Okay, so whatever is diriment, it's an information which is helping you to make a more precise differential diagnosis, which is at the end what we daily need, because whenever we have in front of us a clear picture of something, how do we need any repertory or any book? The issue is that when we need to try to understand better what's going on and what we have in our literature. Beyond that, even if this book was so much inflated, the repertory became something so huge, from a balloon to a kind of zeppelin, we still have to face the issue that many of those symptoms are still written with this Victorian lexicon. And, nowadays, it's such a pleasure for me when I go to India and I see so many young students, which we don't have anymore in Italy, unfortunately. I still have to try to understand why those poor guys, those poor people, does not have only to make so much efforts to study homeopathy, they have even to learn the code of how the repertoire is written. So it's interesting because still after so many years, we have symptoms like anxiety of consciousness that very few people knows what it is. I am an old homeopath, I know it, but I'm using these words since almost 40 years. Whenever you find out some hypertrophy in our lymph nodes, it was called scrofula, but nowadays you have also to be a good doctor to make a clear distinction, to use a diriment understanding if this is a mononucleosis or if it is a lymphoma. We have many symptoms that were correctly added at the time of Kant, but now writing something lasciviousness, unobservant, lack of moral feeling, cretinism, idiocy, very often they're not medical terms, are even something extremely judgmental, which was understandable at the time of those beautiful colleagues, but nowadays I think they are not only obsolete, are very incorrect. So again, I think it's important not only for us, I think it's important for our beautiful medicine, the homeopathy. It's important, I think, for our students that are interested in homeopathy. I think it's important when we want to show to other colleagues, which are not necessarily studying homeopathy, but they are interested in what we're doing, that our vocabulary is modern, can be shareable, can be used by all of us, and can be understandable. So how often you find out literal symptoms where the meaning is so debatable? What does it mean now? What does it mean for this author instead of another? If you think about, something like forsaken feeling, this kind of concept is completely different from pulsatilla to lachesis to opium and to the other remedies. So not by chance, those remedies were added by different authors, which very probably meant something very different when they say this symptom instead of this other. How often you find out synonyms? If you go a very clear one to study the back symptoms, you find out stiffness and tension, which is at the end the same. And if it's not just the same, it was more or less the same for different authors, which decided this symptom, tension, instead of stiffness, which is more or less the same. But the symptoms for those beautiful suggestions in the repertory, the remedies are not the same. So again, we have to recognize this beautiful, let me say, almost obsessive work done by those masters of homeopathy many years ago. I think, I feel that our task, our duty is to improve this work, to make it better, and to think that the repertory was needed at the time of Kant because they had only paper books. If you think about what could happen now, if you think about of postponing, launching forward homeopathy in 100 years, if Kant should have started his work today with computers, probably nobody would ever thought about using something like a repertory, because now it is easy to access directly to cases, to access directly to materia medica, to access directly to articles. At that time, it was absolutely impossible to remember all the symptoms for every remedy. And so a book with all the complexity and difficulties of writing a book like this was mandatory. So it was exceptional, a wonderful, fantastic work to which each one of us has to be absolutely thankful for his life. Otherwise, we couldn't work as homeopaths as we did. But probably nowadays, we have to continue this work, in my opinion, trying to make it better and better. So mainly giving more precise, clear, not occasional information. What I mean when I say occasional, again, it was normal to add the symptoms honestly from your daily experience, but the symptoms that you got from an interesting case, probably in many of these situations, were symptoms observed in a case, but not necessarily symptoms so specific for this case, which is at the end what we need to know whenever we study a patient. So, as I told you, I had this idea. It was impossible for me even to think about such a work without Fiorella, Federico, and Riccardo. So again, I have to be very thankful to them, and we are still working together in terms of improving it to try to make something that we consider a prompter, a suggester, a book which is telling us something like, please, Massimo, think about this. Please, Massimo, consider that. So we started to think about Suggesta, and we named it Suggesta, which in Latin, means suggestion. With this idea, I said to myself, if it is true that on one hand, you take the responsibility of writing a book of materia medica, writing as more as honest as possible your own information, your own experience, what you are seeing in your practice, which was not probably seen by others. At the end, this subjective experience can be used also in a repertory. What do I mean with that? Our intention was and still is not to make a better repertory. It's not to make something which could compete with the existing repertories. Those books are excellent, are very well done, are the result of a wonderful work done by other colleagues. I know that with us now there is also Paresh. I am very grateful to him for the beautiful work that he did in his reliable repertory. All these books are done collecting as faithful as possible whatever is present in our literature. What we are doing with Suggesta is to try to take responsibility of saying, okay, let me mainly underline my clinical experience. Let me mainly underline my point of view. Let me take the responsibility of deleting something that probably was honestly added by someone, but in my opinion, is not that correct. It's not true. I am sure, absolutely sure, that whatever I try to share with my colleagues and my students for a certain percentage is not that correct. I'm very happy to be corrected like this. Okay. So I think that the other repertories, which are a faithful attempt to present us, to give us as better as possible what is written, is something. I started to write this book from my more than 30,000 editions collected in all these more than 35 years. And slowly, around the structure of, uh, of the Kant repertory, we built a different way of thinking. And in the future, our intent is not to enlarge Suggesta, but to shrink it, to try to make it preciser, preciser, and preciser with new ideas, new additions, new things, but mainly cleaning whatever, in my opinion, is redundant, mainly on a clinical basis, and trying to write something extremely precise and diriment as much as possible. Probably you already know that, but I would like to clarify what I need, what I say with additions. I started more than 30 years ago to use a program. Rupari was so nice to mention it, which was called Consulta. And with this database, I am collecting verbally, verbatim, whatever my patient says from the beginning to the end of the consultation. Every time I see them, I type and type and type and type. And I have in my computer more than 10,000 cases, from which now I can play as I like, and I can collect whatever I want. So since that time, I started daily, and when I say daily, I mean daily, to take at least 1 hour of my time to restudy what happened this day, how many cases I've seen, which good ones, which were not reacting at all. And from the good ones, I started to compare this remedy prescribed in other cases when it was successful, which kind of symptoms, which kind of themes, which kind of problems they had in common. So this kind of symptom was not only from Mr. Massimo Mangialavori, but also Federico Del Conte. When I give him Lycopodium, had exactly the same kind of problem, same kind of idea, same kind of symptoms, which I have. And only when I was able to collect symptoms from at least 4 or 5 cases with the long-term follow-up. Please, please, I don't mean at all that I'm able to treat my patient just with one remedy. This could be stupidity. not even stubbornness. But often, I'm sure that it happens also to you, to have the luck, to have the capacity, the possibility of following a patient with the same remedy for a long time, which means, in my opinion, that these patients are the most reactive, the most precise in describing you how this remedy works. And I am sure that those patients knows much better than any materia medica what is lycopodium, because they have the experience of this remedy, while we study what is written in books. So only in this case, I take those common, recurrent, shared symptoms in long-term cases follow-up. I try to inform my colleagues and possibly to get the confirmation of those symptoms by them. This is the basis of my editions. This is the work which I'm doing more or less every day since so many years ago. So I would like to make very clear, not only because I respect so much Paresh, which is here, as I respect the work done by Van Zandvoort and the work done by Scroyens and so on. I don't want at all to suggest you to replace Suggesta and not using anymore those other beautiful repertories. Suggesta, in my opinion, is something aside, is something that works like a complete repertory, but mainly, I insist, the problem is to try to get rid of the plethora of those huge amount of symptoms in the direction of something very accurate, shrinked, and possibly a more modern kind of language and lexicon. So the first draft, which is the one that you can see, that we will see in a few minutes, is available for the programs on the market, which I consider the best. Synergy, which was the old Kent repertory, and Opus, which was the old Radar. And we're working together. I am working differently, to be honest, with Paresh, because I'm trying to share my opinion and my ideas how to make the program better, as I did with David for more than 17 years. And I hope to be able to continue this stuff. But, I'm offering to them, and I am very grateful that they liked this work and decided to use it. This is the website that we created. This is an independent website, is our own website, which we created exactly for this reason, which is in English as well in Italian. The reason of this website is mainly to share with you some clips done by each one of us about certain pieces of the repertory. Because, of course, on one hand, you have to respect what was written before, otherwise, it's too much a confusion to start to use a new book. On the other hand, if you want to say something new, you are obliged to put in information which, if you don't read and study carefully the book, you will never see. So we will have some tips and information, few minutes for different kind of concepts, giving you ideas and information about how to use it. But one of the most important part, in my opinion, is this one, which is called prompts. Because in this section of our website, we are already starting to collect suggestion, information, ideas, mistakes that can be seen by our colleagues, because of course you can imagine that such a work cannot be done without some mistakes, cannot be done without the idea of improving something. So the users of Suggesta, if they like, can write us and say, please, Massimo, I've seen this, please correct it. Please, Massimo, I think it should be better to do like this, to do like that. So my intention, of course, is to write this Suggesta as I like it, but I am extremely open to your suggestion and to your ideas, and please to your help for correcting our mistakes. So we have this draft going on. We will have more updated regularly because it will be on a cloud, and also with substantial upgrading more or less every year. So before we close this concept, it's important to clarify these two very important ideas. First of all, we are not going to replace any existing repertory. We're thinking to offer you a different way of considering the repertory. On the other, it is a biased work. It is a kind of work where I took the responsibility of saying, this is what I've seen, this is the result of my extremely honest clinical experience, whatever I can tell you from what I'm seeing. Sorry if I'm doing some mistakes. This is what I am experiencing daily. This is what I think should be deleted. This is what I think should be corrected. This is what I think should have to be done in a more improved way. Okay? Sorry. So let's enter now after the introduction, sorry, precisely in how Suggesta looks. We got immediately some complaints about some colleagues because we are not using the same section as in the other repertories. We use a mega larger section, as you will see, and we decided to name this section in Latin. Why Latin and not English? First of all, because let me say very presumptuously, you know that Latin is the language of medical literature. You use so many words in English, in modern medical English, which are still Latin or Greek words. We also wanted to use something in Latin to clarify from the very beginning that our macro sections are not like the common sections used in the other repertories. So, for example, you see that we have a mind, which is called mens in Latin. We divided the dreams, which are called somnium. But the most important issue is that those sections, those macro sections, they have a structure which is recurrent and which is mainly thought in terms of functionality. Let's see what I mean with that. For example, this part of the body is the throat. In certain repertories, you have internal throat, external throat. In our case, it's called the ugulum, which is the name of this area of the body in Latin. In this area of the body, you have the external throat, the pains of the external throat. In every section, the pains are always another part from the common symptoms, as at the end, originally, even Kant wanted to do. Then we have the internal throat, and we have also what, anatomically speaking, is there, the larynx and the trachea, starting from here and going down. And also we have the function of this part of the body, which is talking, the speech, the voice. I give you another example. If you think about the chest, which in Latin is called thorax, I think in English I use the same word. You have the chest, you have the chest pain, of course, you have the cough, you have the heart and all the symptoms related to circulation. Please consider that this part of the Suggesta was done by a cardiologist, an homeopathic cardiologist, who did an excellent work. Okay, we have something about the lungs, of course, in the thorax, and the function of this part of our body, which is the respiration. If we move down to our belly, which in Latin is called venter, we have abdomen, of course, abdominal pain, rectum pain, stomach, and stomach pain. We don't have symptoms about the digestion in our repertory as a separate section. If you think about the genitals, there is something in genitals that can be very different, which is about how the female one is different from the male one, sorry. But also there is something, for example, whatever is so poorly studied about sexuality, that not necessarily can be studied dividing so clearly the men symptoms and the female symptoms, the male symptoms and the female symptoms. So for that reason, we prefer to use the concept of genitalia, of the genitals, as a large macro rubric. And you see that here we inserted also as a part of it something which is related to our genitalia, which is the female breast pain and the female breast symptoms, which are divided from the others in our repertory. As well, we have the prostate symptoms as the prostate pain. This is just to give you some ideas. But also, we added some new sections or some macro sections. As I told you, in our Suggesta, the dreams section, which is the one on which I personally worked, I worked on the mind section and the dream section. The other ones were done by my colleagues, and then I have to correct all this work. So Somnium, which is the dreams, is a separate one, because I think that this is really something different from our mind. There is another section which is called Rejecta. You will see what it is. Another interesting one which is called Morbi, which are the diseases, and another one on which we are already working that will come out in the second draft of this book, which is about the themes, according to my way of studying those in my materia medica. So what do I mean? Rejecta, again, in terms of functionality, is a macro section where we have all whatever our body is pushing out, is rejecting. So we have the expectoration, the perspiration, the stool, urine, everything connected here. Why? Functionally speaking, I think that very often you have remedies, basic ones like sulfur, where you see that there is a tendency to overfunction in this way. Okay, as you have remedies that are very poorly functioning in this way. And for that reason, we preferred to underline this concept of reading the patient in a functional way to put in this microsection all of them. The Morbi one, I think it could be something very interesting for you, because at the moment we collected in this section whatever in the repertory is written in terms of diseases. You know that by definition, our homeopathic perspective is to underline the specific subjective symptoms of every disease. But also it is interesting, it is remarkable in my opinion, not only to report what was done by our colleagues before, but also what we can do nowadays and what can be done by other colleagues of today. So this Morbi section has mainly two meanings. One is an historical meaning, which means reporting what in our literature was written like this, full stop. Second is asking you to collaborate, to improve it, to add new diseases, to add new ideas, and to underline those as important diseases cured successfully with homeopathic remedies. I think it can be something very, very useful in the future, not just now. What we did, an interesting work was done in working outrageously, let me say this without being presumptuous, on the cross references, which we improved dramatically in terms of quantity and in terms of rationalizing them. What I mean with that, give a look. This is, for example, a simple, again, I have to thank my colleagues because not those slides were not done just by me. I'm using some of them in our presentation in Italian, so this is not just my work. You will see later on the beautiful moving slides done by Federico, which are very, very well done and excellent. So you see that if you compare the cross references of such a silly rubric like difficult respiration, you can see how many more cross references we have in Suggesta in comparison to other repertories. You will see later on also in other sections. If you give a look into the mind, which we call in Latin mens, which is practically the mind and nothing else, you see how many more mind symptoms as cross-references are there, and how much we're going to add also from other sections as a suggestion of the repertory. How many symptoms related to urination could have to do with insecurity? How many symptoms related to sexuality could have to do with insecurity? How many erection problem could be there, for example? Okay, so we're doing that. Give a look just to this symptom, insolence, how many more cross-references we have in comparison to the other repertories. And for example, there is something that is appearing here because I'm just taking a shot of this page of Suggesta. You see, this symptom does not even exist in the other repertories, concerned about the integrity of his body. And you see how other interesting cross-references you have, even considering orthorexia, which is a concept that does not exist in our literature, not only in our books. See, for example, affectation, how many more symptoms you have in comparison to the others. Okay, this is true for other one like reproaching and things like that. Let's go on. Another important work that we did was, whenever was possible, to group together different kind of rubrics, which are scattered in a kind of perspective that for us is not that logical. Let me show you something clearly from that point of view. This is work done by Federico, who is attending with us. He could explain it to you much better than what I did, but he's a little bit shy in speaking English. Probably next time he will be able to give this presentation on his own. So give a look to what we did together, what he did so beautifully, because he did a huge work on the section generalities that we call generalia in Latin, about the food. So I'm giving you some example about the use of alcohol and alcoholic drinks, as you can see here. So you see that we moved that, we considered those symptoms in one single section about alcoholic drinks and not scattering into different kind of alcohols, okay? And all of this are in the same alcoholic drinks symptoms together, differently from what is in others, in other part of other repertories, okay? Let me give you another beautiful example done by Federico about the farinaceous food. In this case, you see that we put together, okay, whatever has to do with farinaceous food and whatever is in common in that perspective, okay, which usually is scattered. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous because my horses came out from the corral and they are walking outside my house. Okay, so what can I do? So something else is about these symptoms related to drinking and eating, which were introduced in every section of the repertory. So here we have to do with the head pain, and in this section of the head pain, we have whatever is related to food. Again, we have something about hearing that we call in Latin auditus, which has to do with, again, symptoms related to food and drinks. This is about sleep, which again is related to food and drinks. Okay, some other interesting information, sorry. This is another interesting work done by grouping together whatever we have in terms of other special diseases. So I'm giving you the example of infection, inflammation, and tumors. So you see under genitalia, you see there, we put together a single subrubrics, which is called infections. And in these infections, you have all the infections all together, combined all together. In this case, you have the infections and inflammation related to the thorax, to the lungs. Okay. Here, there is the new section, the one which is called morbi, the diseases, the morbidity. And for example, you have here tumors divided in benign and malignant. And you see that together we put the ones known by that. Here, it's a beautiful work done again by Federico, where you see something related to the blood diseases, okay, which are rearranged in this way, as you can see. Okay, this is our database, not what looks like in Suggesta, in SHA's program. This is again a beautiful work that he did about other symptoms related to other diseases that are all condensed together. See, like the tumors and flu. So this is an example of whatever is related to eating and drinking, which is, in this case, in thorax, in cough, which has to do with whatever is related to the moment of the functions of eating. And let's see some new rubric. For example, in every section of the repertory, we collected all the symptoms which are related to different kinds of emotions. What I mean with that? Give a look. This is venter, which is the region, the macro section of our belly, of the abdomen. In abdominal pain, you have in this general section, whatever is emotionally related to belly ache. So you want to know what is happening whenever you have symptoms related to mortification, indignation, grief, fright, excitement, which are producing this kind of pain. It is all there condensed, organized in one single subsection. This is another interesting stuff that we did, where we created, again, for every section, something related to different kind of sensation and even metaphorical sensation. Give a look here. This is abdomen, venter, abdomen, all the sensation of something that is related in the entire abdomen to this kind of experience. This is what beautifully Federico did about this sensation, that for some of you, I think, can be very, very interesting. You see, sensation of clutching that is related to that. And we divided also the metaphorical sensation, where instead of something that is just a common sensation related to an emotion, is related as a description, which is metaphorical. This is about the head, okay? Again, you see that there is a sensation sub-rubric, which is describing whatever is happening in the head. And here you see sensation as if metaphorical, which is describing exactly in terms of metaphors what is present in our repertoire. This is about back. Again, you have all the sensation in the back part of the body. For example, something new is about the milk, which is related into genitalia and breast symptoms. All the symptoms milk related are present in this part of the repertory. This is another very interesting concept. I'm sorry if I'm going too fast, probably, but I don't want to annoy you with too many things. But there is really a huge amount of work that we did. So some new rubrics, what I mean with that. I give a special importance to the way that our patients are describing their way of suffering. Because a concept which, in my opinion, is not so well underlined is about the subjectiveness of our symptoms. You know, in medicine, we divided the signs from symptoms. Signs is more or less whatever is objective. Symptoms in real medicine, in objective medicine, not in homeopathy, is whatever is subjective. We call symptoms whatever, but there is a clear division between symptoms and signs. Considering that in the most of the cases, the pains are symptoms, so they are subjective. They correspond to a very important subjectivity of our patient, which is also very metaphorical, not only a kind of neurological symptom. When you describe a pain like burning, it can be something affecting your nerves, which makes sense. It can be something affecting your mucous membrane, which makes sense as well. Often, this idea of burning is related to something else. The idea that the pain is excruciating, is tearing you away, is breaking you in pieces, and many other beautiful descriptions that we hear from our patients, in my opinion, are a clearly precise description of your subjectiveness. So in this case, we arranged all the pain symptoms into two big categories. One is about, I think that Maggie should mute her microphone. One is about the direction of the pains. The other one is about the characteristic of this pain. I'll show you what I mean with that. This is about the direction. If you give a look in general, pain, direction of pain, you see that you have pain that can go backward, crosswise, diagonal, downward, inward, and so on. This is all condensed in one section about the direction of this pain. If you give a look to this other part of the pain, here we are talking about the characteristic. Again, here we have a lot of interesting modalities because we have pain that are, superficial, which is not written like this in the repertory, means all the pains that are perceived as something not entering in our body, not penetrating, as if we have something broken, as if we have something that is, instead of superficial penetrating, entering our body, crossing our body. All these kind of descriptions, pain that are unendurable, are not in our repertory in this way and are very clearly reported in Suggesta. I would like now to say you something else because otherwise it's too long. I would like to talk about two sections which are, for me personally, very important. As I told you, we decided to share our work. Each one of us is working on single sections of the repertory. I am in some way the supervisor of everything, and I took two pieces. One is the mind section, the other one is the dream section. So I would like to explain you what is new, what is different, and how it is reorganized in Suggesta. Let's give a look first of all to somnium, so the dreams. First of all, this is something, as I told you, different from the mind section, because it means something completely different. It's something else from the mind, in my opinion. Theoretically speaking, we could consider something which has to do more with some vision symptoms. In visus, for example, we have interesting symptoms of what you see that is something in between delusions, hallucinations, impressions and things like that. So give a look to how beautiful can be this symptom in vision about the colors, and how many of this has to do with the delusions and other interesting images, which are mental symptoms and not just delusions. Okay. So I think this is one of the most beautiful section of the repertory, which is describing with a big emphasis a material that is meaningful for the patient, and it is completely subjective. That has to be by definition interpreted, because I think that to take the dream symptoms as if they are a sign and not a symptom is a big mistake. And very seldom you find out exactly the symptom reported in the repertory as it is in the life of our patients. So it needs more than other section of the repertory a capacity, an interpretation, and understanding, which is very metaphorical and not so direct. Okay. Otherwise, I think that you cannot get so many good information from the dreams of our patients. So in this case of somnium, differently from the mind section, we did not such a big reorganization because it is just an alphabetical list of many of those dreams, but with many of my additions, because probably that I give a big emphasis and a big importance to this part of the experience of living of our patients. Who of you knows my cases? Seldom I don't investigate as much as I can on the dreams. I'm giving you some few examples about what I added in terms of correction. If you give a look to Dreams Adventurous, this is the old complete. Okay, you see how many more remedies you have here in Suggesta. 231 is my additions. Okay. Another example, certain kind of concepts that in my opinion are very debatable, if not judgmental, as I said before, if not a kind of lexicon which is strange. For amorous dream, I made a very clear study on each one of those symptoms, on each one of these remedies. And if you give a look to Suggesta, if you go to amorous, there is nothing. This is empty in our Suggesta. It suggests you to go to erotic dreams, okay, which in my opinion is more accurate lexicon. And if you go to erotic dreams, you can see something interesting. First of all, you find out different kind of cross references, because I think that romantic dreams and lewd dreams has very little to do with the erotic ones. And you see here that we have different kind of cross references, as we have many more remedies than in the common section. I give you other examples. In dreams anxious, you see which are the cross references in the complete and which are the cross references here. And you see that we are also crossing not only with other dreams in the same section, we are crossing with other symptoms in other section of the repertory. So something about sleep and something about the mind. Okay, like it is here in this case, but it's not this one about the mind symptoms related to anxiety. Some other example. These are other additions from my cured cases. If you give a look to the dreams of being betrayed, here you see just silica. You see how many more I added from my good cases. You see the dreams of building. Again, you see how many more remedies you have in this case. Another example of how we did in terms of cross references. If you give a look to the dreams of coffins, there is just funerals, which in my opinion is not correct, And in Suggesta, you have all of this in terms of cross references, which are missing. This is a correction. Are you sure that whenever you have dreams which are embarrassing you, it has necessarily to do with unsuccessful efforts? In my opinion, it's not like this. So I took away this as a suggestion. This can be debatable, but not necessarily it's like this. And I add other symptoms that are not in the original repertoire. Again, here you have to do with missing. In dreams of excrement, for example, see how many more dreams you can consider related to this, which are not crossed in this repertoire. Again, this is a substantial addition of new symptoms and cross which are corrected. If you give a look to unsuccessful efforts, you see that I added other symptoms which are missing in the common repertories, like runaways, to try to seduce someone, to try to shoot, but your pistol is not working, and other kind of interesting ones. Okay. Again, this is a new, complete different symptom which is missing in the other repertories, which is the dream of competing, of running a competition and winning in this competition, as you can see. Here is not present, here is there in Suggesta. Give a look about vivid dreams, what we added. This is an occasion to explain you something else that we will see later on about the time of the day, which in Suggesta are used very seldom. And I will explain later on why. Okay. Let's give a look to the mind. The mind differently, means differently from somnium, which is the dream, was completely revised. So it was a huge work that I did. And I had to correct the first level, so the symptoms, which are not anymore the same. We took away many, we added many of those. There is a correction about the subrubrics, many more second level symptoms which are not present in the common repertories. The concept of whatever is concomitant is important. I will show you later on what does it mean. And there are a lot of additions and correction about different kind of symptoms. Let me give you a look and show you something about the first level symptoms. Give a look to agoraphobia, for example, in the complete, which was my referring because I'm working since KHA programs since too many years ago. You see how much agoraphobia here is corrected with remedies, even at the third degree, like Venus Mercenaria, which is completely missing in this repertoire. Give a look to alcoholism. Alcoholism in Suggesta does not exist. What happens? It happens that if you go to Suggesta, you find out alcoholism. Alcoholism is telling you we're not considering this as a symptom for many reasons. Alcoholism at the time of Kant was not only alcoholism, was very probably the only way that people that can be dependent or addicted to something could use only alcohol because it was the only available one. So what we did was that alcoholism is still there. So you know that we are not deleting this information, but you are suggested to cross to dependency, addiction, dipsomania from alcohol, which is even a much modern description of this. And you see here, in dependency, addictions, I add alcoholism as classically it is reported, as I added the dependency from amphetamines, cannabis, cocaine, drugs in general, addiction to medicine, addiction to sedatives, to sex, to tabagism, and all the different kind of cross-references that are not present in other repertories. Another example from the complete, you can give a look to panic attacks. This is the historical version. Give a look of what we did in Suggesta. You have many, many more remedies, confirmed one, third degree, like this. 231 is always my addictions. You have more cross-references, and you have also additions in terms of different kind of panic that you can see, like social panic, noise rooms, and things like that. The concept of dignity. You see how few symptoms and remedies, or few remedies, sorry, you have in the conventional repertory, how many more we have, and how many more cross-references are reported here. Dogmatic, okay. Again, like alcoholism, has no remedies at all. It is crossing you to conservator, and you go to conservator, sorry, and you see here that for conservator, you have other suggestion in terms of cross-references, and you have also more remedies than in dogmatic. Okay. Also with sub-rubrics that in dogmatic does not exist. For example, attached to routine, rites, and traditions. Okay, see how many more sub-rubric we have for dogmatic, or more precise ones we have for dogmatic. Contradictory, again, does not exist because in correct vocabulary, it is called ambivalent and is a more precise word. So if you go to ambivalent, you find out again more and more precise cross-references and many more remedies too. Contrary is one of those words that we can call Victorian. We still use that. Even Bill Gray, which is here, I've seen before, and which I would like to hug in our cyberspace, knows very well how often we use this word, which is now called oppositional. Okay, so if you go to contrary in Suggesta, there is nothing. Contrary is suggesting other kind of possible cross-references, like oppositional, disposition to contradict, disobedience, refusal to accept another authority, which is a symptom which does not exist in the other repertory. And you see now in Suggesta how it is oppositional, with how many more and many more precise sorry, cross-references you have. Orthorexia is a new pathology. I hope that you know what does it mean, which is completely missing. And you see here that you have this new rubric with all the remedies that I've seen up to now confirmed with that, and also other interesting cross-references to this concept. The idea of being independent is practically a new symptom with all these cross-references and new remedies that are not considered for this symptomatology. Also in children as a sub-rubric. Narcissism, you see. All of those first-level concepts are completely redone. The tendency to appear as a victim of society, victimhood, are those ones which are missing in the other repertories. Concept like spirituality, concept like transcendence, with the cross-references to that. Concept like synesthesia, which is a very interesting mind symptoms, so common in many drugs, which is completely absent in the other repertories. The attitude of being stoic, you see, related to the sense of dignity. So the correction of the second level, give a look to that. Here you see anguish. See which kind of cross-references we have in the traditional complete and which kind of cross-references we have here. For anguish, there are no remedies because they are just under whatever is specific for this in Suggesta. Okay. The concept of concomitant. What does it mean? Wherever it is needed, you find out in every important symptom this other symptom, sub-rubric, which is concomitant. So we're talking about anguish. You find out concomitant with 20 sub-symptoms, third-level symptoms of concomitant, which means that you have this kind of symptomatology, anguish, in abortion, abscessing, cholera, colic, and so on. So whenever there is something interesting and important, for every important mind symptoms, the concomitants is all condensed in one second level rubric, where you have all the concomitants all together and not, scattered in the main symptom. You see, for example, here you have concomitant with the laughing, and you have the cross-reference to a mature behavior, jesting, smiling, cheerfulness. Again, another concomitant about restlessness, okay, with the cross-reference and all the concomitant symptoms of restlessness. Let's give a look to that, the additions, and even the adjustment of degrees. Give a look to affectation here in the autocomplete, and give a look to the affectation in Suggesta, and which kind of difference you have in terms of degree, cross-references, and more precise symptoms. Here in anticipation, you can see how many corrections you have in terms of degrees. The yellow is the third degree, the velvet, the purple is the second, and then this is the first. For example, here about cannot look at blood or knife. You see that there is another interesting cross-references and how different remedies you have and how different correction in terms of degree. Nux moscata here is 1 degree, here is a third. You see, alumina muriatica is missing, and here we have the second. Alumina phosphoric is missing, alumina silicata as well. Okay, calcarea carbonica, which is such a common remedy, is missing too. Give a look to claustrophobia. What is done in terms of cross and what is done in terms of correction. Give a look about compulsive disorders. How many cross references you have here? How many remedies you have here? 22. How many remedies you have in Suggesta for compulsive disorders? How many different kind of cross references you have? And how different kind of remedies you have here? Relocation, what does it mean? It means that in mind, you have an interesting symptom, which is unconsciousness. And if you study this symptom, unconsciousness, is describing fainting symptoms, which has very little to do with something which is in the mind. It has to do with something which has to be in generalities. So it is moved as faintness in generalities, and it is much more precise with all the precise and correct sub-rubrics. So I'm just giving you an example. I'm hoping it was not too long and too boring for you, but I wanted to give you just few of the most significant, in my opinion, in order to show the huge work of reorganization, of correction, of definition, of adding new remedies, of deleting some remedies, which in my opinion are there by mistake and so on. Of course, you can easily understand how hard can be to respect a structure to which each one of us is so affectionate, so accustomed to. But also, in the meantime, if you're offering something new and different, much modern and so on, we did whatever we could in order to keep the old symptoms and to make cross-references to this, to the most precise one. Sometimes it's impossible. If you have concepts like transcendency, if you have concepts like orthorexia and so on, it's not so easy to go there if you don't know that those symptoms does exist in Suggesta. So, as I said at the beginning, we will do our best to offer in our website some clips to explain you what we did and few interesting concepts which are missing completely in the other repertories. And please, 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 I'm not saying this at all in order to criticize the beautiful work done by our colleagues, but I'm telling you it is something different. Something is to collect the best and the most precise from our literature. Something else, I think, is to take the responsibility of adding what you observed. So this is what I observed, which is missing in other books and is there in Suggesta. I'm not telling you again that this is better. I mean, this is something different, which is mainly based on more clinical clinical symptoms, than proving symptoms. Okay. So we did our best to respect this structure, but of course, I cannot avoid to tell you, please give a look, read Suggesta. Take your time sometimes to give a look in the repertory. Do not seek for words using the search function, but scroll the pages, because this is the best way to see, oh, there is something interesting. Oh, there is something there which I did not consider. Because it's beautiful that you can search symptoms using such a wonderful program like SHS, like even Opus, but please, scrolling the symptoms, scrolling the pages as we did when we used the books is extremely important, in my opinion, to read, to study this fantastic material that we have, not only using Suggesta. Okay. So, as I told you, we need also your help if you are interested in this work. So there is this website where you can help us giving your suggestions, and please, whenever you find mistakes, instead of saying this bloody Massimo did that, please write me and say, please Massimo, I've seen that. Can you be so kind to correct it? I would really, really, really appreciate that, because I'm sure that we did plenty of mistakes, not intentionally, of course. This is the website, which now is available in English, and you can give a look to that if you want. We're already working on the second draft, where we will have other additions, because as I told you, I used to do this work daily. I'm not doing this since the last August, because I had to give out this material to Paresh. And so I could not touch it again. Otherwise, we had two different kind of books. But I miss so much this work that I did daily. I am resting a little bit, but I miss it a lot. Okay. We will have also correction, redefinition of symptoms, new sections. This most important one will be about the themes according to my experience, and you will see some other new surprises, which I'm not going to tell you now because it is a surprise. Before we finish, let me take a few seconds because I'm becoming old and I can cry easily without desiring to do that. I would like to thank David. I would like to remember him in this moment because without him, I would never have access to this material. I would never have been pushed to consider this work. So I have to thank my best friends, Federico, Riccardo, and Fiorella. I have to thank the first ideator of this, the first one who almost whipped me in order to oblige me to consider this work. This was a, this is a beautiful picture that we kept, we shot the day that I flew to USA because David had to go to the hospital to make the first X-ray in his brain, and we found out those metastases in his brain, several ones. And so they had to start to make this irradiation, which were completely useless, but probably in their plan, possibly interesting to try to control at least the headaches. And so David had to shave his beautiful head, and I could not see my best friend without his hair. And so I decided as a sign of sympathy to do the same. You know that I always used to have long hairs. So it was something which I did from my heart to demonstrate how close was my heart to him. And it is one of the most sweet picture that I like to remember about us. Okay, sorry. That's it. So if it is actually not all, because we have so much to show you, but I did not want to disturb you and to annoy. So if you have some questions to which I can answer, I will be very happy to tell you something. Here you can see the beautiful program done by Paresh and how it really works in reality. So,
Thank you so much, Massimo.
any question?
That was a wonderful presentation. Yes. So if you have questions, please post them either in the chat or in the Q&A box for Massimo. Massimo, there's one question, which is, will the repertory be available as a paper book as well as in the program, or just in the program?
This is an interesting question. Let me say that, first of all, even if we did our best to shrink it, it is still something big, more than a brick. And it is very expensive. Probably our colleague can imagine this if you made this question. It is very expensive to print such a book. So if we can find out someone that can help us to do this work, it can be an interesting idea. I thought about this. I offer to Narayana, which is the publisher of my books, to consider that. They give a look to the repertory and they say, no thanks, it is too much for us. So if you can imagine how much it is to us, too much for them, how much it could be too much for me. I'm not here to talk about money, please, but for the moment, we had to pay a lot of money to build this program, to create this program, to work on this program, to get off a long amount of hours from our lives. You can probably imagine that. So at the moment, we really don't have the money to do this. We really don't have the time. If anybody can find out a printer for that, we will be extremely happy. Probably there is a foundation to which I am in contact in Germany that seems to be interested. I will let you know. Oh, here is Fiorella.
Yes, and
Close to
Federico is
Federico.
here too.
Ok, grazie amici miei. So, other questions? I don't know if Fiorella or Federico would like to say hello to our colleagues. Can you switch to Fiorella or Federico, Rupali, a second?
Yes, they can, they're panelists, so they can unmute themselves and address.
You can talk, Fiorella, puoi parlare anche Federico.
Hello to you all. And I would like to thank you, Massimo, for this good presentation, for your English. And I'm glad that so many people listening to you, and they demonstrate so much interest in our artwork of this year. Thank you all, really.
Grazie, grazie. My good English is not true. It's my Italish. It's something different. Federico, vuoi dire qualcosa?
So we have a lot of gratitude and compliments coming in, and I think everybody can't wait to use the repertory.
I hope so. Suggesta, please. Okay. Okay. If there is nothing, I'm here. Otherwise, please give a look to our website. It's easy. Suggesta.it, which is Italy. Sometimes there is an interesting website which is not com or U, which is IT, Italy. Okay. You can give a look to suggesta.it. And if you have any ideas, suggestion, or interest, please give a look to that. And let me thank, before we can stop and we finish it, again, Rupali, again, Paresh, again, all the team of SHS for their attention, their support, their love, and for the possibility of offering to you all this huge amount of work that we did. Without that, it should have remained just in our computer. Okay. So thank you to SHS from the deep of my heart. Grazie.
Thank you, Massimo. Thank you, Fiorella and Federico, for joining us today.
Have a nice night. Bye.
Bye-bye.